You ever watch a guy stare at a goblin for 5 seconds and walk away acting like he found a hidden hate manifesto under the loot menu? Because that is the Crimson Desert drama in one stupid package. Somewhere between a long nose, a trading post, and a brain steeped in internet sludge, David Jaffe decided he was not looking at a fantasy merchant anymore. Instead, he convinced himself he had discovered coded antisemitism inside a Korean action RPG, like a clearance rack Indiana Jones with Wi-Fi. Here is the question I want sitting in your head until the end, when a green monster shows up, and your first thought is a Jewish stereotype, who exactly just told on themselves. Usually people flatten this into another culture war slap fight. Others pretend gamers are only mad because somebody criticized a game they like. Neither version gets the point. What happened here was not criticism, frankly, it was a self-report with camera lighting. Jaffe looked at a goblin, made a leap nobody asked for, and then acted shocked when people noticed where his brain went first. That is the scandal. Nobody planted that association in his head, and nobody whispered it into his ear. He volunteered it, like a man calling the cops on his own subconscious. Meanwhile, normal players saw the same goblin and thought, shady merchant, overpriced, maybe useful later. Gamers know fantasy language because they have lived in those worlds for years. Anybody who has touched an RPG longer than a lunch break understands goblins are usually greedy little freaks, because fantasy gave them that role forever ago. Contrast that with Jaffe, who saw the same setup and instantly built a conspiracy board, because the place was called Gold Leaf Trading Post. Apparently, in Jaffe world, any word starting with gold is now a coded signal. By that logic, GoldenEye is propaganda, Goldfinger is evidence, Golden Grams are suspicious, and the Golden State Warriors need questioning. Honestly, that stretch deserves a medal. Picture the gymnastics required to hear Gold Leaf, and somehow land on Goldberg, like a decoder ring flew out of a cereal box and hit him in the skull. Suddenly, every pawn shop is sinister, every ring display is a clue, and every shiny fantasy name belongs to a secret network only one angry ex-dev can expose from the couch. None of that is analysis, all of it is projection in detective cosplay. At a certain point, a reach stops being a reach and becomes a pulled hamstring in public. Then, the contradiction kicks down the door. Jaffe said the game felt like antisemitic trash. Minutes later, the same man said he was loving Crimson Desert. Sit with that, because it is magnificent in the dumbest possible way. Apparently, we are supposed to believe he found hidden racial poison in the game and kept playing because the combat was too fun to quit. Brother, that is not conviction. That is a guy calling the chef a hateful lunatic while wiping the sauce bowl clean with extra bread. No normal person hears that and thinks, what moral courage. Every normal person hears that and thinks, the outrage is fake, but the content is good enough to farm. Online culture breeds this exact contradiction. Platforms reward the performance of disgust, not the burden of consistency. Social media trains creators to sound morally alarmed, without sacrificing enjoyment, convenience, or engagement. People get to scream that a thing is evil, keep consuming it, keep posting about it, keep monetizing the reaction, and still expect applause for bravery. Whenever somebody says a game is hateful, while grinning about how much fun they are having, you are not watching conscience. You are watching content strategy in a fake halo. Now, add the part that makes the accusation look even dumber. Pearl Abyss is a South Korean studio. Sil is not plotting how to smuggle old European propaganda into a goblin side quest and hoping David Jaffe cracks the code on social media. Culturally, it reeks of Western narcissism. Too many online loudmouths assume the whole planet shares their exact political baggage, historical shortcuts, and app-based obsessions. Newsflash: the world does not orbit American discourse. Sometimes, a foreign studio is just making a fantasy game, while one guy from the West jams it through his own busted filter. Worse than the arrogance is the savior routine. Nothing gets more exhausting than some Western creator marching into an Asian studio's work and saying, actually, let me explain why your goblin is offensive. According to my feed, Jaffe was not protecting anybody, he was auditioning for relevance in a room that did not need him. Next comes the Flames of Greed quest title, which Jaffe treated like buried evidence in a criminal trial. Imagine being stunned that a goblin-related quest mentions greed. Fantasy has been running that play since before broadband. Elves are elegant, orcs are blunt, dragons hoard treasure, and goblins chase money. None of this is hidden, none of this is fresh, and none of this is some coded dissertation on real ethnic groups. Genre fiction uses recurring archetypes, because that is how genre fiction works. Complaining about that is like opening a racing game and filing a report because the cars are fast. Here is the part that folds the whole take in half. The goblin merchant he targeted is not even the villain. Shakotu is apparently helping stop corruption and set things right. So, not only did Jaffe invent the scandal, he also missed the character's role because he was too busy playing internet bloodhound. That is elite clown behavior. A man loads into a game, panics at a nose, and then fails reading comprehension. You could not script a cleaner cell phone if you tried. Context kills fake outrage, which is why fake outrage tries to outrun context every time. Speed matters more than truth online, and noise matters more than clarity. Hot takes get rewarded for arriving first, not for surviving contact with facts. Jaffe did not want to understand what he was seeing. He wanted the sugar hit of being the first guy to yell aha, like a discount Sherlock with head trauma. That impulse explains a lot of internet behavior. Certain people would rather be dramatically wrong in public than quietly accurate in private. Players notice that instinct immediately, which is why gamers came down on this take so hard. Audiences can tell when somebody is engaging with a game, and when somebody is rummaging through it like a raccoon hunting moral ammunition in a trash can. One approach comes from curiosity, another comes from clout hunger. Jaffe was not exploring a world, he was scanning for a controversy he could own before dinner. Every sentence he posted made that clearer. Funny enough, this gets even uglier once you remember his history. Jaffe has spent years whining about woke trends in games, and rolling his eyes at anyone treating fiction like a political minefield. Suddenly, the same guy wants to cosplay as the most socially vigilant man alive, because a goblin had a long nose and sold goods. Pick a personality, and keep it for 10 minutes. You do not get to spend one era mocking sensitivity, and the next acting like a fantasy merchant is carrying out coded ethnic warfare. That is not growth, that is desperation with a refresh button. Even the reaction told the story better than he did. His take pulled views, but the comments cooked him. Ratios are not sacred truth, but they do reveal when the room thinks somebody stepped on a rake and kept lecturing anyway. Jaffe did not come off like a brave whistleblower, he came off like the drunk guy at the end of the bar, explaining why the slot machine definitely winked at him. Plenty of people looked at his argument and spotted the obvious. This was not the game exposing prejudice. This was a man exposing the filing system inside his own head. Ironically, the source makes the whole thing funnier. Here you have David Jaffe, the guy behind God of War, suddenly clutching pearls over goblin facial geometry. Kratos has probably committed more theological war crimes before breakfast than this merchant has committed in his entire pixel life. Yet, that universe was apparently fine, and this is where the moral emergency starts. Please. Watching the architect of divine dismemberment act like fantasy knows shape is where civilization collapses is comedy without editing. Psychologically, the pattern is not complicated. Certain people cannot stand being observers. They need to be the one who notices hidden code. They need to be the one who spots danger others missed. And they need that tiny narcotic hit that comes from feeling morally sharper than the crowd. Unfortunately, that urge turns criticism into a conspiracy vending machine. Feed it a monster design, and out comes a social indictment. Feed it a shop name, and out comes a symbolic thesis. Feed it pushback, and out comes victim mode wrapped in self-importance. Notice the strongest evidence in this whole story never came from the game. His own first association is the smoking gun. Nobody forced that goblin to Jewish leap into existence. Nobody manufactured the thought for him, and nobody guided his hand. He supplied the connection like a man bringing his own shovel to the burial. That is why self-report fits so perfectly. He did not unmask the developers, he unmasked his own mental filing cabinet. Plenty of players saw the same character and never made that leap. Tons of normal people looked at the quest, the merchant, and the setting, and simply saw fantasy doing fantasy things. Jaffe saw a goblin and turned into a hall monitor for his own imagination. One side interacted with fiction like adults, the other side used fiction as an excuse to livestream projection. Guess which one looked crazier? Practically speaking, there is a lesson here for anyone watching from the outside. Do not let loud confidence overwrite your own judgment. Check context before you inherit outrage. Ask whether the accusation still holds once the story, the culture, and the character role come into view. Watch for contradiction, because contradiction gives away the scam fast. Anybody calling a product hateful while publicly loving it is not guiding you toward truth. They are farming your attention. Another rule helps too. If a creator needs every topic to feel like a 5-alarm emergency, that creator is not informing you. They are feeding on your nervous system. Good analysis can survive nuance, bad analysis needs panic. Honest criticism starts with evidence. Clout criticism starts with a vibe, and praise details never arrive. Jaffe's argument did not fail because gamers were defensive. It failed because it was built out of projection, ego, and half-read context, which is basically drywall held together with spit. Once you see that pattern, internet drama shrinks fast. Suddenly, it is not some giant cultural reckoning. Instead, it becomes one man with a platform, a goblin on a screen, and a desperate need to turn his own mental association into everybody else's problem. That shift matters, because it saves you from being dragged around by every loud idiot who discovers a new imaginary emergency before lunch. Awareness is not glamorous, but it is useful. Seeing the mechanism kills the spell. So let us answer the question from the opening. Who told on themselves here? Not Pearl Abyss, not Crimson Desert, not the players, and not the Goblin Merchant. Jaffe did. He walked into the room, saw a fantasy creature, announced the real-world category his brain jumped to first, and then wondered why everybody looked at him like he had confessed to something weird. That is the entire drama. That is the punchline. Everything else is just debris from the impact. Sometimes, criticism points to a real issue worth confronting. Occasionally, outrage lands on something ugly and deserves backup. This was not one of those times. Here, the only thing exposed was one creator's need to stay loud, stay central, and stay dramatic, even if that meant inventing a scandal out of a goblin and a shop sign. End of story. Honestly, that is the saddest roast in the whole mess. When the need for relevance gets strong enough, a man will stare at a monster and accidentally describe himself